State of the franchise for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this has probably been my most highly requested state of franchise video. A lot of you Falcons fans want to know what are my thoughts on the current state of the Falcons franchise. So, the Atlanta Falcons finished last year with a 4-12 record. They fired Dan Quinn near the middle of the season, and Raheem Morris took over as the interim head coach. At the end of the season, they decided to bring in Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, and I'm really a big fan of the hiring of Arthur Smith. A big reason why is because Arthur Smith is an offensive-minded coach, and he is a guy who puts a lot of emphasis on running the football, which I think is really good for Matt Ryan, because at this state of his career, we obviously know that Matt Ryan is starting to regress. We saw it last year. So when you have an aging quarterback that's starting to show signs of regression, that means that you need to put more emphasis on taking the ball out of his hands and putting more focus on running the football. And last year with Atlanta, we really didn't see that. I mean, near the end of the season, they got a lot better running the football with Todd Gurley, but the run game wasn't really as effective as it should have been to help out Matt Ryan. And when you have a quarterback the age of Matt Ryan, I don't think that he needs to be throwing the football as many times as he was last year. So you bring in Arthur Smith, he should be able to help that run game get back in the right direction. For Matt Ryan, I think the writing is on the wall. I think that we are going to see Matt Ryan retire either the end of next year or the following year after. I think Matt Ryan probably only has 2 years left. Now, you can still win with Matt Ryan because there were some reports and speculation out there that the Atlanta Falcons could trade Julio Jones and Matt Ryan. Those reports have now been denied. It looks like Atlanta is going to keep Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, but we don't know because we're still in the early stages of the offseason. Anything can happen. But when you look at the Atlanta Falcons, and I've been saying this for over the last couple of years, this is a team that does have some talent. Like, I don't want to make it seem like the Atlanta Falcons just need to completely rebuild and they need to trade everybody. I think that the Atlanta Falcons need to make some improvements on defense. The secondary needs a lot of work, which the secondary has been the biggest Achilles heel of this Falcon defense for over the last 2 years. You need to improve the secondary. Maybe you can bring in a couple of marquee free agents and free agency to improve that. But I think overall, with the right head coach, Atlanta could be a borderline playoff team. And what I mean by a borderline playoff team, I mean they're a team that could clinch, one of the last remaining spots in the playoffs. Maybe they clinch a 6th seed or a 7th seed, but they're a borderline playoff team because they could make it to the playoffs, but they also could be on the outside looking in on the playoffs. Now, the most important thing for Atlanta this offseason is going to be, okay, who is going to end up replacing Matt Ryan? And I think that the Atlanta Falcons have a pretty good situation with the fact that they have a pretty high draft pick that they should be able to snag one of the best quarterbacks in this draft class, whether that be Trey Lance, Justin Fields, or Zach Wilson, depending on how the NFL draft goes. So if you're Atlanta right now, I mean, you're in a pretty good spot to the point that you should be able to find your successor for Matt Ryan when he ends up hanging it up. Now, for a Falcons fan, from your standpoint, you're looking at this team, you're saying, JT, is there any way we can somewhat make a run to the playoffs? Well, you most definitely can, because like I mentioned earlier, your team is really good. I like your offensive line. Even though your offensive line isn't great, I don't think it's terrible. You have a good amount of talent on there. Your wide receiving core is pretty good with Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. Remind you that Julio Jones was struggling with injuries last year. So if he's able to stay fully healthy and you got Calvin Ridley as well, on top of that you have Hayden Hurst, then you have a really good passing attack. You have one of the better passing attacks in the NFL. Now, if you can get the run game going, which I don't know what's going to happen with Todd Gurley, because Todd Gurley he was really good inside of the red zone, but we still didn't really see the Todd Gurley that we saw back when he was playing for the LA Rams in his prime, when he went berserk in 2018 when the Rams went to the Super Bowl and lost to the New England Patriots. So when it comes to the run game, that's my biggest question. And for Arthur Smith, he's going to have to try to get that run game going. Now, if Atlanta can come into the 2021 NFL season with a balanced attack, they're able to get the passing game going and the run game going, then I think that this is a team that could compete for the NFC South, because the NFC South, a lot of things are about to change. New Orleans potentially could see Drew Brees retire, which Drew Brees is already regressing as it is. So you have a New Orleans team that is in cap hell right now. They're going to have to let go of a lot of talented players to maximize their cap situation. You have Carolina, who you shouldn't sleep on Carolina. Carolina is heading in the right direction. Then you have the defending Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I think as of right now would be the premier favorite to win the NFC South. But if you're Atlanta, I mean, you still have a really good chance to end up clinching one of those last remaining spots in the NFC playoff rankings. So if you are an Atlanta Falcons fan, I mean, I know it may seem like I'm giving you a false sense of hope, but it's not like Atlanta just is one of the most least talented teams in the NFL. And that's why I was trying to point out to people last year when I had the Falcons going like 6-10 or 5-11. I said, listen, the Falcons, if they miss the playoffs, it's probably going to be because of Dan Quinn. Because for you to be able to win games, you have to be able to have a good head coach. It doesn't matter how talented of a team you have if you don't have a good coach. And I look at the Atlanta Falcons and I look at this roster and I say, okay, they have some holes, but they don't have as many holes that they need to fill like a team like the New York Jets. So when I look at the Falcons, I don't really see a team that is all that terrible from a talent standpoint. I see a team that just needs a good head coach and a team that's able to get the most out of what Matt Ryan has left in the tank at this stage and age of his career. Now, like I said, Matt Ryan did lose Atlanta a couple of games last year. And nobody's denying the fact that he is declining, but the defense lost a good majority of the games that Atlanta played. And don't even get me started on how they lost to the Dallas Cowboys earlier on in the season. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys don't even want to talk about that. I don't even want to talk about that because I'm still disgusted on how they lost that game. But for Atlanta, your franchise right now, You're at the bottom of the bottom, okay? You can't. The only good thing is that at this point, you can't go no lower. You can't go no lower than 4-12. It's not going to get any worse than that. The only way you can go is up from this point. So for Atlanta, you had a pretty down year. You've had pretty down seasons ever since you lost to New England in the Super Bowl, and ever since then, you just declined until the point that you're just at the bottom of the bottom. You're in the bottom of the earth. So now if you're Atlanta, now you should be able to ascend, because I don't think you can be any worse than 4-12 unless you plan on rebuilding. But I haven't really heard anything mentioned from Atlanta and from the front office of the Falcons organization when it came to a rebuild. I don't think Atlanta wants to rebuild right now. If Atlanta was going to rebuild, then we probably would see more trade rumors surrounding Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, because I don't think you rebuild with a veteran quarterback, and you most definitely don't rebuild with a wide receiver like Julio Jones. Teams that rebuild don't rebuild with veteran quarterbacks the majority of the time. So for Arthur Smith, he is getting a pretty solid team. I feel like the Atlanta Falcons and the LA Chargers were the two best spots for a head coach that wanted to try to win right away. So for Arthur Smith, I don't think that he's going to have all that difficult of a job. I think all he really needs to worry about is trying to get the run game going and trying to find a way to help out, improve that secondary. So for the state of the franchise for the Atlanta Falcons, like I mentioned, you're at the bottom of the bottom right now. But I don't think it's too bad to the point that you can't be a borderline playoff team come 2021.